Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Gloria Blackwell, AAUW CEO. It really is a pleasure to welcome you to this important briefing on AAUW's new strategic plan. We will be having an interactive discussion today and want to hear from you. But first, we need to go over just a few housekeeping items in order to ensure that we can have the most productive conversation possible. We'll start today with a presentation on the new strategic plan and the resources that we have available for member leaders. Then we're going to open it up for Q&A. We have a great turnout today, so please remain muted until you're called upon to ensure that everyone can hear. And also feel free to use the chat generously. And with that, I see more folks coming in. We're going to go ahead and get started. I hope we can all agree that the need for AAUW's work has never been more urgent. Certainly nod your head if you agree with me. Across the country, we are witnessing funding cuts to higher education, diversity and inclusion rollbacks, and growing barriers to access and opportunity. AAUW's mission, which is advancing gender equity for women and girls through research, education, and advocacy, is more critical now than ever before. As we gather today, it really is essential to recognize the serious challenges that women and girls are facing in education and in the workplace, challenges that threaten decades of hard-won progress. States are slashing funding for public colleges and universities, driving up tuition costs and student debt, both of which disproportionately burden women, especially women of color. At the same time, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, which open doors for underrepresented and underserved students, are being rolled back in education and in employment spaces. So as a result, access to higher education is becoming increasingly unequal, with fewer supports for first-generation students, low-income women, parenting students, and those from marginalized backgrounds. These barriers directly impact the economic security, the health, and the leadership opportunities for women across generations. Simultaneously, workplace protections, from paid leave to protections against harassment, remain inconsistent, underfunded, or under attack in many areas. Without these safeguards, women continue to face inequities in pay, career advancement, and work-life balance, forcing too many out of the workforce or into precarious employment. At this pivotal moment, AAUW's mission, it's not just important, it's essential. Because we are needed to champion evidence-based policies that protect educational access and workplace equity. We are needed to train and empower women to advocate for themselves and their communities. And we are needed to stand as a national and a grassroots force defending and expanding women's rights, their educational opportunities, and economic security. Because really, the bottom line is this: if we don't act boldly now, we risk losing the progress we've fought so hard to achieve in the future. That's why your role in our collective leadership is really critical to AUW's future impact. We have a responsibility to step forward together to ensure that every woman and girl has the opportunity to learn, to lead, and to thrive. Now, I'll turn it over to Shannon Wolf to go through each piece of the strategic plan and what it means for branches and states. Thanks again for joining us.
Great. Thanks, Gloria. Appreciate those welcome comments. Carson, if we could put that slide deck up, that would be amazing. Thank you so much. Let's go to the next slide. So welcome everybody. Really excited to be with you tonight to be talking about the strategic plan. As Gloria mentioned, this is a really important moment in time, and in thinking about what the strategic plan was going to be and what we wanted it to do, we wanted to keep a few things in mind, and I wanted to go over them with you tonight. The first thing we really wanted to do was to reaffirm our mission and our focus as an organization. As you know, our mission statement is quite broad, and that's in some ways on purpose. We can fit a lot underneath that umbrella. But this is really a time for us to think really carefully about the work that we're doing and to focus the organization at this moment in time. We still want to create those paths to empowerment. We still believe that higher education is a key path to financial security, and we want to make sure that we're highlighting that type of work. We, of course, want to meet today's challenges, as Gloria mentioned, there are very many of them, but we cannot do everything and be everything to everybody. And so it was really important in creating this plan that we try to be realistic about what we can achieve, and the support that we can provide to branches and states as well as to our other national audiences. And really importantly, we wanted to be able to really uh, demonstrate how we can leverage our collective impact. And what we mean by that is how we as AAUW, as the national office, as branches, and as states, how we collectively can have impact in this moment and in the world. And it was a really important piece of what we were thinking about as we were creating this plan. Next slide, please. So there are three main pillars of the strategic plan. The first is to acknowledge and uplift our funding for women in higher education. At the national office, that expresses itself in terms of our fellowships and grants programs, and we know branches and states also have a lot of funding for women as well. And so we'll get into that in a moment. But we really wanted to uplift and highlight our work that provides funding for women, particularly in this time. Our second pillar is really about our advocacy work and some of our on-campus work in terms of our Work Smart and our Start Smart work. And that's really about removing barriers to success in higher education and the workplace. And we really wanted to highlight that work specifically for a couple of reasons I'll talk about in a minute, where we may see a little bit of a shift in focus for the national office. And then that third pillar is really what I talked about in terms of collective impact. We want to make sure we're calling out and supporting branches and states as much as we can, really supporting those local efforts because so much of what we do as a collective organization happens on the ground with branches and states. Next slide, please. Great. So let's talk about these priorities one by one, and then we'll also talk a little bit about how we see that from a national office perspective and in branches and states. So as I mentioned, funding in higher education is a really, really important part of what we do. From a national office perspective, our fellowships and grants work is about half of our annual budget. And so we know that those programs provide direct funding for women. They support academic research at a time when it could not be more important to do so. And they also support some of the leadership development for our alumni, our fellowships and grants recipients in the past. From the branch and state perspective, there's still a lot of funding out there, and we see it from the national office as a pipeline that the states and branches are working on funding for women that's typically in their scholarships. That can be an undergraduate. I know many branches and states have undergraduate scholarships, and in some ways that can also support K through 12. We also know, of course, that branches have some STEM programming across the country as well. So within this priority, we really see it comprehensively as not only what the national office is doing, but to be inclusive of the branch and state work as well. Next slide, please. Priority 2, as I mentioned, is really about our advocacy work. And this is really where you may see some differences in what we focus on from the national office. In the past, in our past strategic plan, which the last one was updated in 2000, so it's been a couple of years since that happened. We really focused on pay equity as sort of the leading issue for the organization. And while we still care about pay equity, it will still be part of our policy platform. It is still part of the public policy priorities document. We're not going to lead with pay equity. We really, at this moment in time, need to focus on higher education and the extreme attacks that are happening that are really devaluing and eroding institutions and higher education. And so really that work is going to be seen in a couple of ways. So one, we want to make sure that educational environments are inclusive and free from harassment, and that's our Title IX work, and as well as our work on other civil rights laws. We really still care about student debt. That's been a core issue of AUWs for a long time. We will continue to work on that, and we're seeing some not so great things coming out about student debt and some programs and some student debt programs, student loans and such things like that. And then, of course, we still care about workplace equity. And so we wanted to make sure that we were focused on higher education, but we also left the door open for all of the great policy work that we do around policies that support women, whether they are on a campus or whether they're in a workplace. If we're talking about something like paid family and medical leave, that supports women on campus, but it also supports women in the workplace. And so that's where we'll see our pay equity work be inclusive in that area. And this is also the priority in which we'll continue with our salary negotiation and our financial literacy training. That's our Work Smarter, Start Smarter, Money Smart work. That'll continue under this priority. Next slide, please. All right, so again, in terms of how we look at this from a national office perspective, we have the national office that really is there to focus on some core issues. We have a small but mighty advocacy team that means we can't cover every single issue that impacts women and girls. So we're focused on higher education, particularly in terms of Title IX, civil rights enforcement, workplace protections, anti-harassment legislation, things like that. This is a constantly changing environment, right? Every day there's something else that comes out that is impacting higher education or women in higher education. And so we may see this continue to evolve over the next couple of years. We also see it, though, from a national office perspective as skill building and training for branches and states, that our responsibility is to do these skill building workshops and trainings so that branches and states can work on the issues that they want to. We would love for branches and states to work on issues that you see coming out of our 2-Minute Activist work and the Action Network. That would make me extremely happy. But we also understand that there are a lot of branches who are working on issues that impact K through 12, say, that may impact some STEM funding in a more focused way than we're focused on at the national office. And all of that's fine, as long as it's mission related. We don't have any issues with that. We just don't have the capacity at the national office to focus on every single policy issue out there that may touch women and girls. And so we see that again as a pipeline, as a continuum, where the national office is providing the skills and the training to branches and states so you can do grassroots advocacy locally to the issues that are really most important to you. Next slide, please. And that third priority is really around our collective impact. So that's national impact and that's local impact. And so that is really supporting branches and states in a way where we can have a really effective network of branches and states that can fulfill the mission of AAUW and really be out there in this moment. It's engaging members and supporters, and that may be branch and state members, that may be national members as well. But we want to make sure that we're engaging members in ways that we can to really have impact in this moment. We're also interested in organizational impact, and so that's going to come into play, particularly when we're talking about the branch survey that we'll talk about in a moment, as well as making sure that we have some foundational pieces internally at the organization in terms of financial and organizational strength. So that's things like making sure that we have balanced budgets. We always want to make sure that we are paying attention to those types of things. I apologize. It looks like we may have lost the slide deck. Carson, do you think we can get that back up? Perfect. Let's move to the next slide, please. Great. So we are really good at, you're going to hear the words collective impact from me if you're at any space with me in the future, probably the next year or two, and also with Gloria, that we're really, really, really trying to leverage this moment and harness our collective impact. And that really comes from you all, right? You are our greatest asset as branch and state members and leaders. And we really need your voices in this moment. And that could be through our advocacy work, that can be through your fundraising campaigns. That is the community that you provide, right? The biggest asset that branches have and states is that you have a community of folks that you get together with and that you communicate with. And that is such a real asset to this organization, particularly in this time. And so we really want to uplift and acknowledge that that is a huge part of why people join AUW branches. Next slide, please. Right. So what we are trying to accomplish with some of this work is to work all towards the same, row the boat toward the same land, right? And part of that is to make sure that we have a couple of things that we're all branches are doing. And you've probably heard of the 5-star program from us before. We're flipping that a little bit and we're changing our language on that a little bit to talk about it in terms of the 5-star framework for success. We believe that if branches do the activities within the 5-star program, that you will be doing mission-based work. You'll be living up to the mission of the organization. And if you do mission-based work, that will help you with recruiting. Branches that we've heard a lot of times from branches that are really struggling with recruiting, struggling to retain members and to attract new members. And this is one way to do that is to follow the 5-star framework. But there are really three things that we want to make sure that all branches are doing. One, need to be doing mission-based work. That can look different for every single branch. We're not here to dictate what you do in your branch. You know your local communities best, and that's why we have branches, right? And we have you on the ground to work on those things locally. But we need all branches to be doing some type of mission-based work. The second piece of this is the annual survey. And if you're a branch leader who's responsible for the survey, you probably saw that it came out on April 1st. That will be for activities that were for this past fiscal year. We would really like 100% participation in this survey. It helps us in a number of ways. The first off is we can communicate more effectively what our collective impact is as an organization. And that's really important in this moment. Right now, I can talk about what the national office does, and I can talk about what some branches do, the ones that filled out the survey. But if we get more participation in this program and have more folks fill out that survey, it really helps us be able to quantify, tell stories about our collective impact that will really help us in a variety of ways. It help us communicate to the public about who we are and what we do. It help us even talk to funders about this is the collective impact of the organization. So it's a really important piece to this. I think before some folks thought it was a little more, less mandatory and sort of I can do it or not. And we would really love everybody, every branch to fill out the survey so that we can get a really good read on what's happening in terms of the branches and all the great work that you're doing. Want to shout you out as well. And then the national, and then giving to national is the third piece of this. I hear the biggest thing that I hear from branches is about recruiting and about national office support. We want more people to answer the phone at the national office. I can't do that. I can't hire more people in the Connect team unless there's more money coming into the organization. And so what we really want to do is be able to support branches and states in the way that they want to be supported. In order to do that, we need each branch to give to the national office. Next slide, please. So, one of the things about why you're here tonight in terms of the leader briefing is that we are going to be launching a toolkit of resources for you this Friday. So you will receive an email from us that will have a link to all of these resources, and that will help you do a couple of things. One, it'll have a messaging guide of some of the key points of the strategic plan so that if you're talking to branch members, state members, people in the public, you can talk about the strategic plan with some confidence. There's going to be a frequently asked questions that come up with a few things that have already come up as we've been talking about the strategic plan with some members and member leaders. And we're always happy to add to that FAQ. So if you're out and about and you have a branch member who has a really hot burning question, you think other folks would benefit from knowing that, let us know. I'll send a link to the email address to get to Gloria and I directly at the end of this presentation. And we're always happy to add things to the FAQ because truly, I learn the most when we're in spaces with a lot of members from a lot of different states and branches. And your collective wisdom is really great. And so we can't know unless you're communicating with us what some of those issues are that we need to clarify. There'll be a one-pager document that if folks want to use that just to sort of say, it could be used as a brochure, but it's basically just a tool that would be available if you wanted to sort of highlight the strategic plan. We're going to have some newsletter content that you can use in your branch and state newsletter. So this is just going to be a way for you to just cut and paste, put it into your newsletter. It focuses on the key points of the strategic plan and the value of branch and state members. So it gives your branch and state members just a little more information about that and redirects to the national website and some more of the resources there. We'll have a social media toolkit if you feel like amplifying some of the messages from the national office. We'd love to see you do that. You can simply follow us on our socials and then repost our posting. That's always something that we love to see. But if you want to repost it or have your own post, we'll have some guidance on how to do that. We also have a couple of other resources that I'm excited about. Excuse me, advancement team is working on member recruiting, sort of a one pager. It might be 2 pages. I'm not sure yet. But it's basically would be useful to you if you're going out and recruiting members, some best practices on how to do that. We also have a publicly policy toolkit that'll be online by Friday. That's going to be a lot of advocacy resources from our policy team about how you can engage in this moment. And this is a really great recruiting tool as well. A lot of folks want to be engaged in the issues that are happening right now. And as you know, we're nonpartisan, but that does not mean that we don't have values and that we don't weigh in on the policy implications of the things that are happening right now. So that's actually a really great recruiting tool as well. And then we'll also have the FY26, so next year, right? We'll have the FY26 5-star criteria so that you can start to look at that and really think through how your branch or your state may do some work that align with that next year. So again, that'll have some resources available with it. It'll be on the website probably, I don't know, next weekish, but you'll have a sneak preview of that by Friday. And that's really important because that's what's going to impact the survey next year, right? So next April, we'll open next year's survey, and we really want folks to sort of understand what the criteria are going to be before the year starts. We know that you all do a ton of planning for the next year. I think a lot of folks have already started, but we know that continues throughout the summer. And so we wanted to be able to provide these resources to you when that's happening. We will also be communicating a lot of this in August, September timeframe. So those folks who may not have been able to get to some of their planning this summer, these resources will be fresh for them when you come back at the end of summer. So all of this will be available on our leader resources and tools page. That's where a lot of other content at the national office lives. So it'll be added to that. So it's not a separate space you have to go to find anything. It'll just be added to that same space. So again, this will all be coming to you at the end of the week in an email. But we wanted to give you a little preview of some of the resources that will be available to you that we hope will be helpful as you're communicating with members about the strategic plan. Next slide, please. All right, so I wanted to just talk a little bit about impact and how we're sort of communicating and talking about it right now. And I wanted to talk about this because when you're using this language in some of the state convention presentations and in the annual report presentation, and I think folks are really, we could be getting some really good feedback on this approach. And that is about how we talk about our work at the national office and how you can talk about your work in terms of the branch or the state. And we're talking about sort of these 5 aspects. Or the 5 calls to action. It's join, give, act, share, and learn. And those 5 calls to action can be different for the national office, and they can be different from the national office to your branch or state. Join, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. We want you to join as a member of AAUW, but that could also be join an event, right? We want folks to give to the national office or to their branch. We know you all do a bunch of branch fundraising as well. Act, we'd like folks to sign up for the Action Network and take some action with us. Share, we'd love for folks to amplify the messages that are coming out from national social channels. And we'd like for our members to just learn and stay connected and informed about not only the strategic plan and our priorities, but the work that we're doing and that is, new things happening every day. Next slide, please. So I would challenge all of you to think about what the join, give, act, share, and learn would be for your branch or state. I think this would actually be a really fun project to do for your board potentially, or even like in a little branch meeting, depending on how big your branch is. Some of you have ginormous branches where this would probably not work. But I think your join, give, act, share, and learn might be a little bit different from ours. And this is, again, as I said, this has been a pretty effective tool for us to be able to communicate what the national office is doing. So I would just encourage you to think about this framework and think about if this is something that would work for you in terms of recruiting folks locally in your community. And it's really about being able to communicate what your branch or your state is doing in all of these different areas. Next slide, please. All right, so in terms of the timeline for the strategic plan, we are obviously here on May 6th. We're at the member leader briefing and sharing some ideas about the toolkit that you'll be getting later this week. The strategic plan will formally launch next Tuesday, May 13th. There'll be an email that will go out to all members and actually quite a large group of folks. It'll be folks that have supported AAUW. There'll be folks that have taken our some of our salary negotiation, our financial literacy courses. It's really going to be a large group that receives that. And then there'll be a webinar next Tuesday evening as well that will be Gloria Blackwell and also highlight Sherry Sorokin and Diane Owens, our incoming and outgoing board chairs that'll talk a little bit more about the strategic plan from their perspective. So we're really excited about that. That'll be the formal launch. There'll be a public website. We'll have social media. Sort of Tuesday is going to be the big splash day next week. And then after that is really where the work starts, right? Or work continues, I guess is a better way to put that. We hope that you all will start to utilize the resources for your planning for next year, that you'll be able to uplift the strategic plan for your branch and state members. And that we can really start to align on some of these issues. Like I said, we're not going to sit here and tell you have to do these 5 things to be, a great advocacy branch of AAUW. We understand that there needs to be a little bit of flexibility in what branches work on, but we really are focused on what the collective impact of the organization is. And so I think it's really important that you also think about what the impact of your local organization is, whether that's a state or a branch. Next slide. All right, so we're going to open it up for some questions. I see there's some activity in the chat, which I have not been able to track while I am speaking because I cannot do those 2 things at once. But if you have any questions or need to reach us, we can always be contacted at executive@aauw.org. So that would be a good place to put in the future if you get some hot burning questions from members and you think we need to add them to the FAQ. Great place for that. Or if you just have questions about what's included or not in the strategic plan, that's also a great place. We can get back to you on that. So with that, I think we will take the slide deck down it's fine for me if folks want to come off mute to ask a question. If you could raise your hand so we could cue you. We have 100 folks on the call tonight, so I think that's probably the best way to go about that. I will take a look at the chat while we're getting going here. Looks like Joyce has said, I hear reports of members who sign up for Action Network but do not receive any contact from National regarding issues. So that should not be the case of what's happening. So again, if you could send a couple of folks who have that issue our way, then we can diagnose that issue and see if there's something larger happening. Looks like Mary Pat has her hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I don't know if I was supposed to type this or if it's okay just to speak.
You're great.
Here's my question. Is the plan going to be more than just a set of priorities, or is it really going to go into specifics about implementation? So for example, if you talk about equity in the workplace, precisely what does AAUW intend to do?
A great question.
Are you going into that level of detail?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, lots of strategic plans get created and then they sit on a shelf and nobody ever looks at them again. I personally have been involved in a couple of those processes with former organizations, and I'm sure some of you have as well. So the strategic plan does have a series of metrics that are behind it, and that we are tracking internally, and of course the board of directors sees as well. And those are reflective of the moment. And so I think it's important when we're talking particularly about advocacy work, that measurement of activity is not the same thing as measurement of impact, right? And so we have a lot of those conversations internally about what is activity versus impact. And just to give you a couple of examples, what we're really trying to do is increase the amount of actions that our action takers are taking, and to increase the number of action takers, right? So have a group of people who are really active with the organization, but we want to make sure that we deepen their impact because that's what's really going to have some impact overall. I can't say that AUW is going to be able to pass X or Y piece of legislation, right? That's not how the world works. That's not how legislation works, certainly not at this point in time. But we are really focused on making our voices heard. And so those metrics are really based on trying to deepen engagement of folks and try to increase the number of action takers that we have. For things like direct funding, it's really about the metrics of that are really about how much money we're giving away, right? And that's why one of the reasons why the survey is so important is because we want to be able to make those broad statements as an organization about what our collective footprint is in terms of how much money we are as branches, states, and national contributing to, our economy and women and all of that. And we can't do that right now. We can talk about what the national office is giving away because that's part of the budget. And I know all those numbers, but we can't necessarily do that for branches. So there are a set of metrics behind the strategic plan.
I'm sorry, if I may, just follow up. I wasn't asking about the metrics, about evaluation. I was asking about modes and means of implementation. So, for example, it's a little opaque to me. I mean, obviously, raising funding, that's clear. But on some of the other things, if you say that a part of the strategic plan is, as I mentioned before, increasing or whatever equity in the workplace, my question is the how. How is there actually a plan in how to do that at the national or any level? I'm just interested because some of it, as I said, is a bit opaque to me. Thank you.
Yeah, so the way that we do that is through our advocacy for policies that support women in the workplace. So that again is through our paid leave. Childcare is a big issue right now. Obviously, we might have some differences in some of the childcare things that are out there in terms of opinions, but childcare is still a very big issue, right? Pay equity is still an issue. So as those pieces of legislation are coming up, we are supporting them. We are having conversations behind the scenes to see what can be brought up in this, current political environment, which we have to, take as a reality. So it's really through the advocacy, the public policies is how we really realize those types of things. We also do some work with our salary negotiation and our financial literacy, which is a little more direct impact, right? In terms of the people that are trained by those programs. I'm not sure that's exactly what you mean with some of those, but because I think that you're really more talking about our advocacy work. But I did want to do a little plug for our Work Smart and Start Smart and Money Smart program. Anjali?
Thank you. Thank you, Shannon. Two things. So one, I noticed that a lot of people who have registered for tonight's program are having difficulty getting in because you've reached the Zoom limit. So at least for all the people who registered, if we could send out the recording and the slide presentation, that would be great. The other question that I think was in the chat, and it's related to something you just said about the Work Smart and Start Smart program. I noticed that those links don't seem to be available on the AAUW website anymore. The only thing I can find is webinars that are scheduled, over the year, but those are like, I don't know, like once a month or even less. Am I missing something? Were those programs taken down?
So, Gloria, do you want to talk about this one or do you want me to take it?
Sure, I can. So Shannon, it was about a year ago, right, that we made the decision to sunset the WorkSmart program that we had online. It needed to be updated. It was actually quite expensive to have it and have all of the background and everything that needed to be done for it. And so we just didn't have the capacity to continue to move it forward. And so that was a decision in looking at also how we could look at a different business model as we were looking at continuing to fund our salary negotiation programs in a more sustainable way. I was the person who, was there when Start Smart and Work Smart were put up, on the website, and when Work Smart Online was actually launched, and it had lots of participation and it had a good run. But the bottom line was, on an annual basis, trying to keep it up, trying to make sure that we could fund all of the tech that was required on the back end. We made the decision to be just more strategic about making it more sustainable and moving to a model that was going to have more engagement with our college and university partners, and just approach it in a different way.
So what is the model now?
So the webinars are available for our college and university partners, as Shannon mentioned earlier. It is also available for those that have an agreement with us that they may have had for quite some time, where we deliver the programs to them. But it's not available just for anyone to go online, because we don't have the capacity to manage that and to keep everything up to date and to pay for the back end of it on an annual basis.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I can just also weigh in that the link to this, the recording will be made available. This Zoom account doesn't have a limit, so I don't really know what the problem is, to be perfectly honest with you.
I was about to say, why aren't...
Francis?
So I do have a question about the Work Smart. I just recommended to somebody about how great it was. She's an assistant to one of the senators in our state legislature. And I didn't know that people who weren't affiliated with colleges couldn't actually go to the webinars. Is that true? If she had gone online, she can't participate in the webinar?
Correct.
Whoa.
It is a benefit for our college and university partners and for our members.
Well, that doesn't help us, because that was one of the things that she was really excited about for AAUW, was the Work Smart opportunity for her and her sisters and her mom. So we're taking away one of the greatest recruiting and advocacy things that we have for AAUW. I'm sorry, I know we don't have the money right now to update that, but why can't the webinars be open to the public?
Well, if they can join, if they want to be a member of AAUW, they can have participation. They're able to participate.
Wow. Okay, then my other question is, do we still have a lobbyist in Washington, D.C.?
No.
Mm.
So our advocacy team
Advocacy.
does a lot of work on Capitol Hill,
Right.
and they organize our lobby corps. If you mean, do we have an external lobbyist that we have paid for? We have not done that in a very long time. So I
No.
don't,
So
if
who is
ever,
the
not since I've been
advocacy
here.
team? Who is the advocacy team then?
So the
Megan
senior,
Cassell? Go
exactly.
ahead.
Megan is the senior director of
Okay.
advocacy, of policy and member advocacy, right? And we have Kalina is on the team, as well as Rashmi. So we have a team of 3, as well as as a intern / temporary staff member, Annabelle. But as Shannon mentioned, we also do have our lobby corps that is, 45 plus strong. They go to Capitol Hill every 2 weeks. We have not had a paid lobbyist not in the 20 years I've been at AAUW, but the lobby corps really does tremendous work. They're very well trained to make sure that they're advocating for the pieces that AAUW is very strongly proposing, and they get the message out. And, same as those who are working across our advocacy work, we definitely are getting the folks to take action on the action alerts and the 2-minute activists. We've had over, I think Megan said, over 6,000 folks who actually, sent those action alerts and sent the emails and letters to their folks in Congress since the end of last year. So we're making sure that we're getting the word out, and they're the ones who are raising their voices on Capitol Hill.
Who is the Lobby Corps?
Lobby Corps, traditionally it's made up of the women who are here in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. Some come, from other close-in states. And they really are just a collective group of AAUW members who are quite passionate, obviously, like many of you, about our issues. They come to the national office on a regular basis and receive training and resources about the particular issues that AAUW wants them to advocate for. And then every other Thursday, they come together on Capitol Hill and they have materials with which the issues are listed, and they have an agenda every time about which offices that they're going to actually be engaged with, and what are the points that we want to raise. And the policy team does a really good job of ensuring that whatever is on the table for the moment, and as you can imagine, these days there's a lot on the table at every moment, right? But knowing sort of what's up for discussion, what is up for voting, so that they time whatever the issue is, they time the training for Lobby Corps members so that it definitely coincides with the issues, and they have the resources and they have the training to put our voices out there and make our values and the issues known at a time that's very strategic, which is really key. It's not just going up to Capitol Hill at any time talking about any issue. They make sure that the Lobby Corps is well trained and that they're very strategic about the timing of every issue that they go and meet with the members of Congress about.
Thank you, Gloria, for explaining that. I didn't know what that was or who participated in the Lobby Corps. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, who else had their hand up?
Judith first.
Judith.
Yeah.
Hopefully I pronounced that right.
Okay. I have a question. The recent information on the initial proposal of raising dues, $5 a year over 5 years, for 5 years, elicited a lot of discussion in our region. I'm from Los Alamos, New Mexico. And members felt very strongly that it was just going to put the organization out of reach for many potential members. What I'm wondering is, are you looking into other ways than just increasing dues to fund, to come up with the operating funds that you need to cover more staff in Washington and or at national and other ideas? For example, I mean, getting some sort of an endowment fund for creating an endowment fund for operations?
Can you take that, Gloria?
Sure. That's a very good question. Definitely when the comments came in about the dues, members certainly raised a number of issues. And as you can see, that the board ultimately decided that the dues increase would be $2 over the next 2 years, right? And so obviously it is important that members do speak up, that we do hear from you, so that all of the information can be utilized in order to make an informed decision. As far as the fundraising piece is concerned, I mean, we are constantly in the process of raising money. For example, just today I met with a number of folks from JP Morgan Chase, where we have had multiple meetings with them, but I've met with multiple foundations and corporations in order to do fundraising. And one of the things that we recently did was that we launched 2 new funds at the national office. You talked about, when you mentioned endowment, I mean, obviously, AAUW, clearly we have the endowment on the fellowships and grants side that will be here in perpetuity. And that is where the bulk of AAUW's funding is, and that funding is restricted. And so we created these 2 new funds, to which we are very excited that folks have already given One focused on defending higher education so that in this moment, we can be available to have funding directly to address many of these issues that are coming up about higher education. And the other one really is around is the public policy fund. So that in the moment, we can definitely take the time to be able to put together the pieces around whether it's the toolkits, whether it's around making sure that we're reaching out to those that we want to come and join and advocate with us. Those are two very important issues: public policy, defending higher education, because it will hopefully allow us, one, to concentrate on the key issues that are top of mind now, but also being able to do more outreach to the potential audiences who can come and join us in the fight, to defend higher education and the issues that we certainly want to elevate right now. So we certainly would encourage anyone who wants to give to those two funds. This definitely is the moment to do so, because operationally, as Shannon, you can add, we definitely do not have the level of, unrestricted funding that would allow us to be more nimble and to be more flexible to address so many of these issues. Thank you, Judith.
Okay.
Can I just weigh in on a little bit on that? I think it's a great response. And I just want folks to understand that we do have a pretty large endowment that covers a lot of all of our fellowships and grants work for the organization. So as I mentioned before, it's about half of our budget. But the part of our budget that's not covered is member support. And so that's all the services that come from our advancement team, and that's the services that come from our public policy team. And so, as you saw with the dues increase, we ended up not doing the original proposal because of the feedback that we received from folks. But dues do not cover the cost of member support. They just don't. And so we rely on contributions from members to cover that additional cost. And I believe it's only 17% of members give a contribution to the organization. A lot of folks think that dues fully cover expenses, and they just don't. So it is a bit of a difficult situation. And I don't think that dues are the answer to everything. So I agree with you on that. But we have to look carefully at where we can get increased funding, particularly for member support. And typically that's not from a corporate or foundation. Karen?
Hi, everybody. Karen Francis from Missouri. Couple of things. Hopefully, maybe one of you will invite people to apply for some of the national committees. And then secondly, I was surprised hearing at our state meeting on Saturday that only 17% of our members donate to AAUW. And the other statistic that was a surprise to me was that 25% of our members are lifetime and honorary members. So do we have any statistics, not by dollars, but how many of those support an organization that we love? Thank you. And thank you for this webinar.
Thank you, Karen. I think those stats, Shannon, you agree that those stats are true. Actually, it's 16% of members contribute to national,
I'm
which
sorry, I got that wrong.
I think it's
I give an extra
16%,
percent.
which many people find very shocking when they hear that. And I think that if we had obviously many more that contributed, we could certainly increase the staff that are on the policy team, all the things, or on the membership team, to provide more service and engagement, and, literally to do just a lot more to address so many of the needs and the concerns of our members. But right now we are unable to do that, right? So 16% it's not that many. And when you talk about honorary and lifetime members, I think Katrina, she mentioned, is it 25% of, yeah, I think the number is 25%. When you think of the number of people who, may have given dues, as lifetime members, 20 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever, or those who reached the 50 years of being a member, which I think is absolutely fantastic. But after that, you're no longer required to pay any dues. So we do have a large portion of our members who aren't currently paying dues, and some of them are also not even donating. And so it is a challenge because when we say we have 40 something thousand members, that doesn't mean every year we get dues from 40,000 people, because we don't. And 16% of those individuals actually are contributing.
And then Gloria, either you or Shannon to speak about the national committees and how people can apply.
Sure, I
Shannon?
put the link in the chat so folks can check out. The application is pretty straightforward, but I really encourage folks also on that exact same page. You can look at each of the charters for the committees, and it gives you a little bit more of an understanding about what each committee is and does. AUW's national committees are a mixture of board members and AUW members, and a few non-members as well, depending on what the committee is. So really encourage folks, if you're interested in getting more involved in something like advocacy or public policy. We have an inclusion and equity committee that Karen is a part of, that does some really great work. We have advancement committee that does some really great work. If there's any part of the organization that you're particularly interested in learning more about, it's a really great way to understand more about what goes on at the national office. And a lot of those committees, as part of their charter, is to provide resources for branches and states. And so it's also a really great way to hear about other ideas that are happening among all of our branches and states throughout the country, and to contribute a little bit of your expertise and perspective to some of the work that's happening as well. Thanks, Karen. I think we have Jeannie Pennington.
Hi, there are a couple of questions that were given early in the chat that haven't been addressed. And I don't know if you want to address them now or if you're going to address all questions in the chat when you send us out information. One was on the EEOC and one was on the possibility of our tax exempt status being revoked.
Sure.
Do you see those questions?
Yeah, going through all the easy ones real quick. So tax exempt status has been obviously top of mind for a lot of folks since it's in the news because of Harvard. I would caution folks to be aware of that there is an actual process for tax revocation. One cannot just say they want to revoke a tax status, depending on where you are in the government, and have that be a thing. So yes, if that were to happen, it would be have a very large impact on the organization, but our attorneys are counseling us that the risk to the organization isn't any greater than it was a couple of months ago, and that they didn't think that we would be necessarily a high value target in terms of that type of attack. But it's something that we do track, and it's something that the board of directors certainly pays attention to. So if that situation were to change, we would have a conversation with state and branch leaders as well, because anything that impacts the national tax status would obviously impact branches and states as well. So not information that we necessarily want to gatekeep if that situation were to change. And the EEOC question, with the EEOC pausing all actions to protect women, how do we address this? Also, Department of Labor Women's Bureau is crippled and may disappear plans there. So, we obviously would love to have a strong EEOC. It's not something we have a ton of control over, but I know that our policy team is working on these types of issues. So the best way to keep updated on that is to become a member of the Action Network and get regular updates. And I'll share this with our policy team as well as some feedback from members.
Yeah, and Jeannie, I will add that I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and on one side of me was the outgoing head of the EEOC, and on the other side of me was the head of the Women's Bureau. And, they presented so much of their frustration and everything that had been taking place, and the fact that it came about like literally at the drop of a hat, that so much had been dismantled. And it was very emotional, right, to have each of those women on either side of me But I must say that in the background, there is a lot of work being done, to save as much as they can possibly save, and also looking at it not as something that is going to exist, forever, and also looking at the legal implications of it all and using that as a methodology in order to push back against it. So thank you for asking that. But definitely, if you're up to date with the Action Network, they can keep you engaged in knowing sort of what's going on.
Thanks, lady.
We're about ready to wrap up, so we'll end with Linda and her question.
And,
Thank you. I appreciate your time and effort with this. Can you hear me?
We can.
yes.
Okay. I have a question that I saw two things joining together in your different conversation here. One was your group, Lobby Corps group. Now, if I understand it correctly, they are given the information they are what to share at the national level, correct? They have talking points.
Yes.
Yes. Now I'm going back to our 5-star plan. It's a very important document for the branches to follow to align our goals and strategies with yours. And a part of the 5-star plan has been to meet with a state or local representative. So is there some way that what is being shared at the national level can trickle down into the hands of those of us that are at the ground level as we try to have conversations with state and local leaders, and I'm looking forward to state, so that the message is the same?
Okay, thank you. I think that policy does as Shannon mentioned, there's a toolkit, and there are other things that are coming out, right, that are going to be shared with all members. And I think that given a consistent message across, whatever the way in which we're getting the message out is something that the policy team is very committed to and very good at. So I don't think that there's any issue with making sure that the way in which we want you to push the message out to be consistent isn't going to be available to everyone. And there are always toolkits that definitely have what the particular wording is. And also they say, depending on, your particular state or whatever the particular issue is, if you stay focused on the discussion this way, these are the points and the messages that they want you to push out. So that information is certainly available throughout the policy team's way in which they've been engaging with branches, and will be increased given the situation that we are in now. So thank you for lifting that up, and we'll make sure that we share that information with them, because right, there's a way of making sure that they're obviously adapting the materials that are already in existence, but making sure that they're more greatly available to a broader audience of our members. So thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Shannon, that was the last question. So before we close, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone for joining us. You are our member leaders, and we are so proud of you and the work that you do. When I looked across at all of the names, I see so many familiar names, and I see so many familiar faces. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Your dedication, not just your dedication, but your creativity and your passion, they really are the beating heart of AAUW. Because you really are the ones turning strategy into action in communities across the country. And you really do inspire us every day. I really want to thank you for standing with us. I want to thank you for leading with purpose. And I really want to thank all of you for believing in the power of women's potential, because we are in this pivotal moment together. Together, we are stronger. Together, we create lasting change. I want to thank you again for your leadership, for your passion, to your commitment to our shared mission. So thanks again. Good night and take care.